Hey everyone, what's going on? So today Palladium has dropped on Waijo Pro, and people were asking me to create a deck profile for it, so I figured I'd give you guys one. But before we begin, I know a lot of you guys who watch don't subscribe, so make sure to hit that subscribe button right below, and we're gonna get right into some replays and a deck profile for you guys right now. So basically how Palladium works is if you open like two Palladium monsters right here, you get to make a Link 3, which is pretty neat. But that's kind of all that the deck does right now. As you can see, there's really nothing I can do from here except use the Raigeki, because this is a normal summon deck. This deck really does need its normal summon to actually do anything. So if you do stop the normal summon against this deck, you basically get an extra turn because the deck cannot really do anything, can't like recover from that, basically. So something I really do like about this deck is it has this really cool combo with Celestial Bodies and any of the Link 1, Link 2 Palladium monsters. Well, either of the Link 1 or Link 2 Palladium monsters, where Celestial Bodies can act as your Chain Link 2, and that can allow the Link 1 or 2 to get your search uninterrupted unless they have like an effect veiler, which most people don't run right now. And after that, you do get the Link 3, which is pretty neat. And what he does is he gains attack equal to the original attack of monsters that he points to, as well as he contribute a Palladium monster to negate any card once per turn. So let's get right into a second replay, and then I can get a deck profile for you guys. So let me know what you guys think of the deck so far. Write down in the comments below. What do you think can make this deck better in the future? Because I definitely know this deck is not going to be like a meta deck or anything too broken. It's going to be rogue at best unless it gets some future support. So before we get to this next replay, definitely leave a comment about what you think can improve this deck for the future. Alright, so we're back with the second replay, and this replay is really cool. I want to show you how this deck actually really counters Mech Knights like ridiculously hard for no reason. I think it's because Palladium actually has something to do with the World Legacy arc, so it does have like this really neat, I guess they did build in like a counter to a previous part of the World Legacy archetype, which is pretty cool. So since Archlord has an arrow pointing up, they can't put their Mech Knight there unless they want him to gain some extra attack, which they're definitely not going to want him to do that. And another really cool Palladium is definitely Sacred Tree. It's basically a Gospel Revival for this deck, where you can just banish it to avoid getting your boss monster destroyed. And this definitely is a turn 2 deck, just because of how good Kaijus are in this deck. So you could definitely put like, I'm playing a 3 Gameciel right now because it's just so insane. Because like you go second and you can potentially end up with this winning you the game. If he didn't have that extra 1,000 to put on Gameciel, that would have been game right there. It's just really crazy. This is definitely going second deck. It's kind of like in the range of Cyber Dragons. Like I think it's a little like Cyber Dragons is just a little better than this deck, but this deck definitely can do some work if it opens up with a Kaiju and just like these two, or just any way to make this board. So let's get right to a deck profile and discuss what I think about this deck. Alright, so this is my profile for the deck right now. So to start off, like I mentioned before, is 3 Gameciel, because this card is just so good in this deck. Like I said before, this is definitely a going second deck. So you put out a Gameciel, you get rid of a problem, and then you pretty much just OTK them on your first turn, which is really neat. After that is World Legacy Crown. So this is pretty much like the first World Legacy monster that came out, where it can negate an extra deck monster effect. But it also has the same effect as a Palladium, plus it has 2,000 attack to put onto Archlord. After that is 3 Palladium of the Vast Sky. Each Palladium has an effect where it can special summon itself to a Link marker, kind of like that one Cyberse monster Lincoln Flyer. But each one of the Palladiums has an extra effect. Vast Sky will give your Palladiums a double battle damage once per turn. but all your other monsters cannot attack, which really doesn't matter because Palladion himself says that any monster he points to cannot attack anyway, so that's no problem. Next is 3 Palladium Celestial Bodies, because this card just really combos well. If you open this card and like one other Palladium, you're pretty much guaranteed to make Archlord. It's just such a really good card because it bounces back one of your Palladiums from the graveyard, so the monster that you normal summon, like say that you normal summon Vast Sky, you go into the Link 1, and then you get your Celestial Bodies from hand. Now Celestial Bodies is going to get back Vast Sky, and Palladium Magius is going to search out a Palladium monster from your deck, which is really cool. Because that means since you haven't since you haven't special summoned Vast Sky to throw an effect yet, you can go ahead and do that too. After that is going to be 3 Rescue Cat. You really only need to see 1 per game because you're only playing 3 beast monsters, but this card just really speeds up your deck because you get the 2 Palladiniums for 1 normal summon, which this deck really needs because it has no way to special summon if you don't have a Link monster on the field. And that's kind of the problem I mentioned with the deck earlier, is if you normal summon and your opponent deals with that normal summon, this deck just automatically loses. That's your turn, you passed, you lost, it's over. It's kind of, it's a huge problem in this deck. Next is 3 Palladium of the Sacred Tree, and this is the one that I mentioned before, it's the Gospel Revival, but also it's a tuner, which is really neat, because that means you can make Needle Fiber, and Needle Fiber can get a second copy of Sacred Tree, and then it can also make TG Wonder Magician. And then you can also use it to make a Stardust Charge Warrior. I just play that for the extra draw. There's no like really good level 6 synchro right now, I think. Like there's Red Wyvern, I guess, but I think Charge Warrior is just like the best generic level 6 synchro to make in this deck, because the deck really does need the consistency since it only has like 2 other searchers in the deck if you don't count Desires. Next up is 2 copies of Fiendish Illusion. I'm only playing this one at 2 and not 3 because you don't really need the effect. It's kind of just there to special summon. The effect really isn't that good because you have to destroy one of your own monsters, which this deck doesn't really have a whole lot of recursion to it, if any at all. So that's a huge problem with this deck is it has no recursion and it doesn't have like any way to recycle your stuff except with Celestial Bodies. So that's definitely a problem with this deck because Fiendish Illusion just, like, its effect is just useless in this deck. Unless, like, you're really desperate to destroy something, it's just, like, a really bad effect for this deck. And next is going to be 3 Ash Blossom and 3 Ghost Ogre. Since this deck really does have a thin main core to it, which is just, like, mainly just playing the monsters and the quick play and the trap, you can definitely fit in all 5 of these hand traps, which is really neat. Especially since you're playing Going Second deck, where you really want to open stuff like not 3 Ash. If you open an Ash, a Ghost, or a Geki, a Kaiju, anything like that is just really good to open with. Since like you always want to be going second with this deck, since it's an OTK deck, and if you open a Kaiju, you can potentially win just from that. Next is Eroda, just to search out Sacred Tree. And then 1 Pot of Desires. I was playing 2, but I decided to knock it down to 1 because there is a lot of combo pieces to this deck, but you are also still playing a lot of 3-ofs as well. Next is 1 Soul Charge and 1 Monster Reborn. This deck absolutely does need Soul Charge to win most of the time, because if you lose like your board, then you're gonna lose really hard right there. And every Palladium Link monster, if you special summon an effect monster to its Link arrow, you get to do your search effect with the Link 1 and Link 2. And it's also really good with the Archlord just because it increases his attack and you have 2 monsters to tribute for his negate effect now. Next is Monster Reborn. Basically the same thing as Soul Charge. You need it in this deck. This deck just loses without these spells to make your monsters have like any type of recursion. And speaking of that is 3 World Legacy Inheritor. This is basically the same thing as Monster Reborn Soul Charge. You need the recursion or you lose. And 1 Designator from the Grave. I was playing this at 3 when I was trying to make this deck work as a first turn deck, but it wasn't really working out because this deck just like, it's an OTK deck. You need to be going second with this deck to really do anything. but it's still a really good card if your opponent has any hand traps on your turn, or for some reason they decide, oh, you can go first instead, if they have any idea of what you're playing, which they really won't since this is still a fairly new deck, or if they just end up playing like Cyber Dragons or Mech Knights where they want to go second too. Next is 3 Albade Palladium. So this just makes one of your Palladium monsters unaffected by all card effects for the turn, which is really neat because if you open up with this, the Archlord Palladium, and maybe like a hand trap or something, then you definitely have like a really good board set up, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent to play around. And then finally is a Crusade Palladium. So at first I thought this card was like absolutely insane, but as I reread it, I realized it's really not that good, so I moved it back from 3 down to 1. So, once activated, you get to tribute one of your Palladiums and special summon a Palladium from your graveyard. So, at first I thought that this was kind of like Time Graph. I thought you could do this every turn, but you actually can't do this every turn. It's only when it's initially activated that you get this effect, because I was thinking you can pretty much just get rid of any of these 1-drops and get to your 2-drop Palladium for 1 monster, which I thought was just absolutely insane. But it turns out that you can only use it the time that it's flipped, and then after that, its second effect really isn't that useful if your opponent has any kind of like removal for your deck. What it does is if you control the Link monster, your opponent can't attack anything except Link monsters. So that's definitely like, it's an okay effect, but if your opponent just like deals with the Link monster, then you're kind of in a bad spot already. And just losing the Link monster is just such a hard loss for this deck. Just like, if this thing gets outed, your deck will shut down right there. It's definitely a huge problem for this deck, is just losing a Link monster basically means losing the game for this deck. Next up is, for the extra deck, I already discussed Wonder Magician and Stardust, so we're going to get right to the Link monsters. One Top Logic Trisabana, so this is the same summoning requirements as Archlord Palladium, so it's also a really good card because it has the whole back row removal as well as inflicting a bunch of damage to your opponent, which, as I mentioned a couple times already, this being an OTK deck, if you get this extra damage in, it might just be a game winner. Next is a Power Code Talker. It's the same thing as playing Trisabana. Doubling your attack can close out the game for you, as long as you've already done something with Palladium previously, and you're able to get some damage in and get them down to a low percent of life points. Next, I'm playing 2 Archlord Palladium. I've already discussed this card a ton so far, but I'll talk about it one more time for you guys. So it takes 2 effect monsters, and it needs at least 1 Link monster, and then it gains attack equal to the combined original attack of monsters that points to. So that's why, as I mentioned a million times already, Gamasiel is crazy good in this deck, since it has the Link arrow pointing up, and you just Kaiju one of their monsters, you put it right in front of your Palladium, now you have a 4,200 beat stick, and you can make that even stronger with Vast Sky pointing in the diagonal left or diagonal right to it. So next up is monsters that this card points to cannot attack. So you can kind of lock out your opponent's Gamasiel that you just put down, or you can lock out whatever they accidentally play in front of it, which is really neat. Then finally, once per turn, is a quick effect, so you get to tribute a Palladium or a World Legacy if you're playing a World Legacy deck and you decide to like tech this guy in. But if this card is this card points to a monster, you can tribute one of those monsters and then target a face-up card your opponent controls, and its effects are negated until the end of this turn. So you can use that to prevent your opponent from using their board wipes against you, you can stop their combo setup, pretty much stuff like that, and you still have this really big beefy monster, as long as it's pointing to something. If it's not pointing to something, it has 2,000 attack, which is really easy to get around. Next is a Troymare Phoenix and a Troymare Cerberus. These are pretty neat monsters. They're usually not going to be co-linked, but their effect of removal and then at the cost of discarding card isn't too bad. And it's also a Link 2 monster, so it can lead in through further combos. Next is a Crystron Needle Fiber. I think I talked about this card enough also, but I'll talk about one more time for you guys. It can be made very easily in this deck with Palladium with the Sacred Tree. If Palladium is in your hand, and you have either Link 1 or you have Archlord Palladium, you can just special summon her, and then as well, and use her with A, use her with the Link 1, or B, use her with any other monster that Archlord is pointing to. And now you get to summon Crystron Needle Fiber, who's going to summon another copy of Sacred Tree for you, which is really useful. Because now with if you used Magius to make this, you can now go right into Palladium. Or if you already have Palladium on the field, you now have him at 4,300 attack, which is really nice. Next is 3 of each of the Link 1 and Link 2. This is pretty mandatory for the deck because the deck really does need to be able to make this combo over and over again. So they all have the same effect as Archlord, where they gain attack equal to the original attack of all monsters that points to. And monsters that points to cannot attack. So the only difference is if an effect monster special summon to a zone that the Link 1 and Link 2 point to, is they'll search out either a Palladium Spell and Trap, which is the Link 2, or they search out a Palladium monster. So guys, that's my deck profile for Palladium. I think it's really underwhelming right now. It's not that great. It definitely does need a lot of support to really do anything in the future, but I'd like to see this deck be able to do something in the future, just because the card art just looks so cool. I can see Archlord Palladium making some waves in like the future meta, being teched in maybe being teched into like World Chalice, World Legacy type decks. That would be pretty neat to see. But this deck, like standalone, I think it's really like I mentioned before, it's kind of like a Cyber Dragons, but a little less playable right now, I guess. You definitely have to open up some really situational hands to do much with this deck. That's all I have to say on this deck. Let me know what you guys think of it down in the comments below. And while you're checking out the comments, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the video, because like I mentioned before, I know a lot of people who do watch my videos don't subscribe. And while you're checking out the comments, you can also check out the description where you can find links to the Gargle Gaming Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and Discord channel. So check all that stuff out, and I'll see you guys next time.